Hello, my name is Ariel, like the mermaid. So one thing that I often receive questions about and just kind of get like comments about is people asking for advice about coming out. And that's one of the hardest things for me to respond to. It's a difficult thing for me to respond to. I mean, I think some people think it's a simple thing, and that all you have to do with advice is just kind of encourage people to just go for it. But I know from my experience with the kind of coming out thing, and I just know like from just the reality that we live in, that sometimes it's more complicated than that. So I guess where I should begin is just in general my experiences with coming out, and I don't really want to go very much into detail about it, but I think it's important to give people just a general idea so they kind of know where I'm coming from with this. So when people ask me what it was like coming out or whatever, or by coming out, I mean, first of all, this begs the question, because if we're talking about just in general, when I started telling people that I was queer, then coming out would probably have started kind of just as a gradual thing in my first year of high school, but that's generally not what comes to mind when people ask me what about when I came out. It's the thing that really comes to mind for me is when I first came out to my parents, and that was my sophomore year of high school. What was good is I felt like I came out at the perfect time. It was exactly when I was ready, and I certainly I don't regret at all coming out when I did. I think it was the perfect time. I think it was the time that I had to. But it wasn't fun, and I knew it wasn't going to be fun. I knew it wasn't necessarily going to just be a thing where my parents were just gonna, easily accept it, and it's a difficult thing. I mean, it's still, it's hard to deal with family about this thing, and I think that that's a thing, and sometimes it takes time. And the honest thing, when I came out to my parents, here's the honest thing. If it had just been, when I came out as, what I said to my mom when I came out to her was that I was bisexual and possibly transgender at the time, was what I said. And so, if it had just been the bisexual thing, if I'm speaking honestly, I wouldn't have bothered. It wasn't important to me to talk to my parents about that. But what really, it was the transgender part that made me feel like I really needed to come out, because I was feeling very constrained in how I could express myself. I was feeling the need to be able to wear different clothing, be able to kind of express my gender in a way that made me feel comfortable. And also at that time I was still not really sure. I was still figuring out, and there were times my sophomore year where I was like sure that I wanted to get sexual reassignment surgery, that I wanted to go on hormones, and that I wanted to identify as a woman. There were times when that was totally a thing. I mean, there's been different times when I've totally felt that. I needed to be able to actually go into therapy and actually start to figure out myself and figure out what was going on. With my mom, when I came out, at first, the thing was, it was, the bisexual thing, and I don't know, maybe if I had just come out, I only came out about the bisexual thing because I felt like, if I'm coming out with the transgender thing, I might as well, that's obviously the question that's going to be, posed is also about that. So, I figured I might as well just, get it all out, as opposed to just beating around the bush with anything. At first, the thing was, my mom was kind of suspecting something, and I think she figured out it was something about me with my sexuality or something, and so the bisexual thing, she was she definitely, that wasn't like totally, didn't totally catch her off guard or anything. But the transgender thing she was totally not expecting, and I didn't assume that she would have suspected it. Like there wasn't any reason for her to. And I mean, at first, she kind of did the typical kind of, I'll love you no matter what. But then, I mean, it gets, I mean, when parents start to actually consider what that means, and what the potential of their child not identifying with the gender that they were assigned at birth, that can be hard for a lot of parents to grapple with. So, I mean, the point is, I don't want to go into, details and specific, but, the fact is, it certainly wasn't easy that year. It was a difficult thing this year, and there's still things that are hard to deal with. So, with that in mind, coming out, and the thing is, I hate to be like such a bummer about this kind of stuff. I mean, I did, and there are a lot of people who you're gonna totally come out to your parents, and they're just gonna totally be like, yeah, whatever, we don't, like that's great, we love you no matter what, and whatever, I mean, there's a lot of different responses that can happen when you come to parents, or you come out to just family in general, or you come out to friends. But the thing is, I think, be prepared. If you're coming out, well, first of all, I think the first question you should ask yourself is why do you need to come out? Why? I mean, not to say that I think that you shouldn't, but ask yourself why it is important, what you need from coming out, because the fact is, it's not something that you always, it's not something that you have a burden to do. You don't have to come out if you don't want to. That's your choice, and that comes down to what is important for you to feel comfortable. So if you first you should ponder that, and ponder if you really do want to come out. And if you do want to come out, then the next thing is, if you're going to come out and you're sure you want to come out, and you're sure that you're ready to come out, make sure that you are ready to come out. Well, first of all, gauge what you think try to have a sense of what, well, I mean, obviously it's very different if you're coming out as just gay or bisexual or pansexual or whatever, than if you're coming out as, if you're coming out as trans. That it's a very different thing. But regardless, try to get a sense of what your parents, just overall, or whoever you're coming out to, try to get a sense of, gauge what their general views, their views are about it generally, about being gay or about being trans or whatever. Try to kind of, figure it out, like how your parents feel about it, or whoever. I'm mostly going to be talking about parents, because I feel like that's like often is the highest stakes for a lot of people, is coming out to your parents. But coming out to anybody, it's going to be very rambly, because it's all over. I have a lot of thoughts about this. But also, once you kind of you figure out that, keep in mind that be prepared for any response, because there's a lot of different responses, particularly if you're trans. It's one thing for someone to totally be cool with people being gay. It's another thing, or people being transgender. It's another thing accepting that your child is, and that's the hard thing, as a lot of parents are like, oh yeah, like I'm totally cool with that. I wouldn't care if my kid was, but then when their kid actually is, because the fact is they have, parents have certain expectations for you from a young age, and it's not fair that parents do that. It's totally not, and they shouldn't do that. But it's kind of human nature, and it's what society kind of makes us do, is kind of have certain expectations of people. And so be prepared for different reactions. There could be all sorts of reactions, like, people, I mean, particularly with the gay thing, that sometimes, or even bisexual, or, a lot of times the parents will say things like, oh, I've always known, or whatever, but not always. Sometimes they have no idea, and keep that in mind. Particularly with being transgender. Don't assume that your parents already know. Don't assume that. Never assume that. Never. Because there's a good chance they totally don't assume that you're trans or that you're queer at all. They don't always assume that. And another thing to be prepared for is sometimes a parent's initial reaction may be very positive. Particularly, sometimes an initial reaction can be one way, but then eventually, particularly with being trans, if the reality starts to sink in, because sometimes I feel like parents don't always realize don't really kind of fully realize what the full implications, if their child says, oh no, I'm actually this gender, or oh no, I'm actually this gender and I want to go by this. Parents don't always fully comprehend what that means. And so you be aware of that, because they might be totally fine, with you expressing yourself, expressing your gender the way you want to, but maybe then suddenly you want to wear this kind of these kind of clothes to a certain event, and then suddenly they're not so comfortable with it anymore, or suddenly you're talking about how you want to go on hormones if that's something you want to do, and then they're like, ooh, and then suddenly it kind of gets outside of their comfort zone. And I mean, obviously that's not to say that you have any burden with things like that, it's not your job. Parents should accept you no matter what with those kind of things. But you just have to be prepared, because sometimes parents can seem totally cool with something at first, and then and a lot of times they don't say it, but sometimes they're secretly hopeful that it's a phase, and when it's not, then they're suddenly become less cool with it. And that's a hard thing to deal with. A lot of people will say, oh, it's probably not going to be as bad as you think it's going to be. And here's the thing, for a lot of people that's probably true. There's probably a lot of people, particularly probably people who are watching this video. I don't know, but there might be. I don't want to make assumptions, so that's the big thing. It might go way better than you expect, and people may be totally accepting, and you might totally not expect that, but they totally are. But also sometimes people can totally have a negative reaction that you don't even anticipate. And again, I should reiterate, sometimes even people who seem like they should be totally accepting and vocally say that they totally accept gay rights and they totally accept transgender rights. Sometimes it's different when a friend or a family member comes out, then suddenly it's kind of different when it actually becomes a reality for them. And if they've known you for a while, sometimes they have a hard time seeing you differently. Not that they should entirely. It's not like you suddenly become an entirely different person when you come out as anything. But it's a hard. And if there's a new aspect to your identity, particularly if it has to do with your gender, that can be a hard thing for people to accept. A lot of times, with this whole thing, there has to be a lot of patience involved and everyone involved, including the people who, who you're coming out to, need to have, patience, but also, and be patient enough to try to, actually take the time to understand what it means for you to have this new aspect of your identity. But also, unfortunately, if you're the person coming out, sometimes you have to be patient with the people you're coming out to. And again, I should reiterate, sometimes you have to make a you have to feel out whether it's safe for you to come out. I don't think it's good to come out at the cost of making yourself unsafe, putting yourself in an unsafe situation. And it's a hard thing to judge. It's hard because sometimes there's unexpected reactions that people have. If you think that your parents are going to kick you out, or if you think that your parents are going to not let you go to college, or interfere with your education, or things like that, you might want to consider waiting until to come out to them, at least until you're in a situation where a more stable situation where they can't really fuck up your life. Coming out can be a very liberating thing, but also sometimes some people don't feel it. Particularly about their sexuality. Sometimes some people don't really feel the need to tell people their sexuality. And that's totally fine if you don't, if that's not a part of your identity that you feel like people need to know. That's fine. You don't need to tell people it. But for a lot of people, it is an important thing, and I think, and it can be a big thing. It can be, it could be a small thing where it's just a casual, like, oh yeah, by the way, I'm this, and people are like, oh yeah, whatever, and like it's totally cool. But sometimes it is a big deal. It's a complicated thing, but. If anybody who is, coming out, particularly if you're coming out to your parents, I wish you the best of luck, and I hope that it all goes well, and that they accept you. And if it's a difficult thing, I hope that you can survive and work through it, and understanding can be reached.